It was supposed to be the start of a new chapter, an honest conversation to end things peacefully. But for one Detroit woman, the decision to ask her wife for a divorce turned into a nightmare she couldn't have imagined. What began as a tense discussion escalated into an act of unimaginable violence, leaving her fighting for her life after being shot 11 times. This chilling story is about resilience, the complexity of human emotions, and how quickly things can spiral out of control. As friends and neighbors tried to make sense of the tragedy, questions lingered. What caused things to escalate so drastically? Could this have been prevented? In this video, we'll take you through the events that unfolded, the aftermath, and the bravery of a woman who refused to let tragedy define her. Stay tuned for the full story. It's one you won't forget. The couple had been together for years, but behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Friends described them as passionate but often volatile, with disagreements that sometimes left those around them uneasy. Still, no one could have predicted how far things would go, and the topic of divorce came up. The woman, whose name we're keeping private for her safety, had been feeling trapped in the relationship. She believed it was time to part ways, hoping for a fresh start and a peaceful resolution. But as the conversation began that day, emotions quickly took over. Words turned sharp, accusations flew, and the tension in the room became unbearable. Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices, but what happened next left everyone in shock. A decision to end the relationship somehow turned into a life-threatening situation, leaving one woman with injuries that would forever change her life. As the argument escalated, the woman tried to remain calm, but her wife's anger grew more intense with every passing moment. She had expected sadness, maybe even frustration, but not this level of hostility. Somewhere in her heart, she had hoped they could part ways with mutual understanding, even if it meant walking through difficult emotions. But it was clear now that her wife wasn't willing to let go so easily. The air in the room felt heavy, and every word exchanged seemed to add fuel to the fire. Friends of the couple would later share that the relationship had always been marked by control issues, but no one knew how deeply it had affected them behind closed doors. In those critical moments, it became clear that this wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about power, fear, and desperation. And as the argument reached its breaking point, the woman realized her safety was at risk. As the argument escalated, the woman tried to remain calm, but her wife's anger grew more intense with every passing moment. She had expected sadness, maybe even frustration, but not this level of hostility. Somewhere in her heart, she had hoped they could part ways with mutual understanding, even if it meant walking through difficult emotions. But it was clear now that her wife wasn't willing to let go so easily. The air in the room felt heavy, and every word exchanged seemed to add fuel to the fire. Friends of the couple would later share that the relationship had always been marked by control issues, though no one knew how deeply it had affected them behind closed doors. In those critical moments, it became clear that this wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about power, fear, and desperation. And as the argument reached its breaking point, the woman realized her safety was at risk. The argument had reached a boiling point, and the woman's heart raced as she tried to de-escalate the situation. She spoke softly, hoping to calm her wife's growing anger, but it was as if nothing she said could break through. The tension in the room was unbearable, every second dragging on as she carefully considered her next words. She thought about leaving, just walking out the door, but something held her back. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was hope that things could still turn around. But then, in a flash, everything shifted. Her wife's frustration turned into something darker, more dangerous. The woman felt a deep sense of dread as her instincts screamed at her to get out, but it was already too late. The sound of a struggle broke the silence, and what followed was chaos. Outside, neighbors reported hearing loud noises and cries for help, unaware of the horrifying events unfolding inside. As chaos erupted inside the home, the woman's survival instincts kicked in. She fought to stay calm, searching for any chance to escape, but the situation was spiraling out of control faster than she could react. The neighbors, unaware of the full extent of what was happening, hesitated before calling for help, uncertain if the sounds they heard were an argument or something far worse. Seconds felt like hours as the woman tried to reason with her wife, hoping for a moment of clarity, a moment to breathe. But then, just as it seemed things couldn't get any worse, another shocking turn unfolded. The woman's phone, which had fallen to the floor earlier during the argument, suddenly began to ring, the screen lighting up with the name of a close friend. That small, simple noise seemed to change the energy in the room. Her wife froze for a moment, the tension thick in the air, but the brief pause only raised the stakes. Would the call bring help, or would it push the situation even further into danger? The woman's heart raced as she realized the true gravity of what might come next. The ringing phone was like a lifeline, cutting through the tension in the room. For a moment, the woman thought it might save her, that her friend would sense something was wrong and act quickly. But instead of diffusing the situation, it seemed to snap her wife back into a state of anger. Desperate, the woman lunged toward the phone, hoping to answer it, but her wife reacted first, knocking it across the room. The crash of the phone hitting the floor echoed, and with it, the fragile silence shattered. Just as the situation seemed beyond saving, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The neighbors had made the call after all, sensing the urgency of what was happening inside. Panic flashed across her wife's face as the reality of the situation hit her. But before the police could arrive, the unexpected happened, a moment of regret. Her wife broke down, tears streaming, muttering apologies as if realizing the weight of her actions. When officers entered, they found a scene they wouldn't forget. The woman, injured but alive, was rushed to the hospital, her strength and will to survive leaving everyone in awe. But the final twist: it wasn't the phone call or the sirens that saved her. It was the neighbors who had recorded the argument earlier, ensuring there was no room for denial. That evidence would later ensure justice was served, and though her journey to healing would be long, she had survived the unimaginable. In the days that followed, the woman began her long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. The support from friends, family, and even strangers in her community poured in, reminding her that she wasn't alone. The evidence provided by the neighbors became crucial, ensuring that her wife was held accountable for her actions. While justice brought some closure, the experience left scars, ones that would take time to heal. Despite everything, she refused to let this tragedy define her. Slowly, she started rebuilding her life, finding strength in her own resilience and the kindness of those around her. Her story became a powerful reminder of the importance of speaking up, trusting instincts, and recognizing the warning signs in relationships. Though the pain of that day would never completely fade, she emerged stronger, determined to turn her survival into a message of hope for others facing similar challenges.